The Hong Kong inspiration, well, David used to play or bring Hong Kong movies and show us. Sam and I, early on, like in the late 80s, went to see Chinese Ghost Story with Sybil Danning and her manager. So we saw that because it had an Evil Dead-like force through the woods. And then a couple years later, a guy, Chris Lee, showed us a movie, The Killer, that John Woo directed. Said, we want you guys to do the American remake. We went, we can't do a better movie than that, but we should do a movie with him, and kind of, that's how we did Hard Target, and which you were briefly a part of.
I was, yes.
And
which was a great experience. I got to storyboard John Woo's first American picture. I had storyboarded so many films, it was rare that I got to work with a director that actually I could learn something from. Most of the people I was working with, John aside, Sam aside, were people were doing their first film and had no idea what they were doing, and the producer would take me aside and say, try to help him out and try to tell him how to do this right. So it was great working with John because he had it all down to such a science.
Her courage will change the world.
I think Xena was born out of a bunch of things. Mainly, for years, I had always wanted to do a female action TV show or female action superhero, and I could only think in the limited terms of Wonder Woman and Charlie's Angels and those kind of things, and that didn't seem fresh or interesting. And it was upon seeing probably even the conflicted character in Chinese Ghost Story, they went, oh, what if you had a bad woman? Yeah, I forget where all of that came in. We wanted, certainly by the time we were doing Hercules, we'd started to see the action tapes and see a bunch of Asian movies, and then realized that, oh, well, this character had been done like this, and they had these traits. Xena kind of became a westernized composite of Clint Eastwood, of Josie Wales, and Asian female action heroes, which were take no prisoners kind of character.
And I think even from the first season of Hercules, we'd started to get a sense that his purity as a character made stories a little harder, because he, the way we had conceived of him is he was, Joe Montana, all-American guy, and really didn't have flaws. And so I think we sort of had and we knew that was a struggle within stories because you can't have them make mistakes. And so then, as Xena, who was originally introduced as a villain with no intention of it continuing on to series. I mean, we
Right.
really made that decision in the middle.
Right.
But
she died at the end of the third one.
Yes, she was supposed to die, and then we saw dailies. We thought, maybe not. And I think we knew that was a more there was a dramatic interest in that flawed character.
Mm-hmm. And then when we were doing Hercules, we did the first Hercules and the Amazon women. We had the big tree attack scene.
Yeah.
And I forget what was an inspiration for that. I know we wanted them to go up and down.
Butterfly and sword.
Butterfly and sword.
Butterfly and sword.
Kind of showed that to the stuntmen, and then when Xena got ordered,
And remember, even before Xena, in what was it, Circle of Fire, that had the running through the trees.
Oh yeah.
No, that was, yes,
Yeah.
you did that.
Yeah.
I should remember that. I corrected it.
Where
Yeah.
we had the character who we had wanted Anna Paquin to play,
Right.
but she wouldn't do it.
Yeah, well, Stephanie Barrett played
So,
it.
and then led to Anthony Quinn having a little meltdown
Yeah.
because the character was supposed to be Zeus,
Yeah.
and he was very upset that we thought he was a girl. What movie did we
Did we pay
that
homage
was
to
it.
that?
pay homage to in that one?
That was actually right out of Chinese Ghost Story.
Right out of
Exact
Chinese.
same framing and shots and everything.
Yeah. What was interesting about studying those films, I mean, back in that time, I remember it was really exciting because nobody else knew about those films. It seemed like there was a small percentage of us film geeks that kind of went and to the revival theaters or the little art house theaters to see those films when it came out. And it was just fascinating to study what the potential was, to see how things were broken down. And I remember when we were trying to figure out how to do as much as we could on a limited budget and a limited schedule, I remember studying those films very carefully just to see how they were put together. And then when I was doing Circle of Fire, I remember submitting storyboards to you, and you saying, "Well, this would be great, but you can't shoot this. This is a television show. You can't shoot this stuff on a television show." And I said, "Well, I've done my math. I know how many shots I can get in main unit. I think I know how many shots I can get to second unit, and I may not get all of this, but I think I can get most of it." And we just kind of jumped in that way, and every now and then something would actually work. And
I remember going to the guys at Tribune in New York and sending them all tapes and getting on this big conference call, and I'd sent them an Asian action tape as to what Xena was going to do and why it was going to be different than Hercules, and it was
It was mostly like Bride with White Hair and Swordsman 3
and Feng Sai Yuk.
yeah, Feng Sai.
yes,
the
the
battle
Legend of
on-
Feng
Oh,
Sai,
yes.
yes.
The battle on the head top. We did it as the opener, and then we did it in Liar Liar with an incredibly pregnant Lucy Lawless at the time.
Come on, Xena, walk on me. You can have my shoulders. I'll help you, Xena.
The Legend of Feng Sai was like a film I loved, and I had gone to see it down in Santa Monica at some point. And so I remember you came to me and said, because you knew I'd seen it, and we had talked about it, and said, "What do you think about if we pay homage to that in the pilot?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, why not?"
But then there was the practical thing that the studio was so short, we had to have everyone kneel down for bits and pieces of all the second unit.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Of course, when we started out with Xena was supposed to be the poorer cousin of Hercules, and we were going to shoot it in 17 millimeter. And the whole idea about emphasizing the Hong Kong action was because we couldn't afford visual effects. So all of the effects we were going to do were all going to be in camera, and everything was going to be shot in 16 millimeter, and we weren't going to do any composites except, well, then I think we ended up having just one or two composites in the beginning, and that
Right.
quickly fell
Yep.
away.
Yeah, and there was something about Xena that it always lend itself more to that kind of sort of the wire work and the high flying stuff than Hercules is such a big brawny guy. For some reason he wasn't believable flying around,
Yeah,
but for Xena you
yeah.
sort of got it.
Of course, again, it was something that we felt was sort of like our private reservoir that we were going to drink from. I remember when Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon came out, and suddenly I felt like it lost its virginity. It's like suddenly everybody
Yes.
knew about
Yeah,
it.
everybody.
And everybody was going, "Hey, wow, did you see this great new style
Right.
of doing action?" We're like,
What was also interesting was the back and forth relationship of it. This was more modern stuff, but isn't there a story, Rob, about that you guys, when you did Darkman, had the great helicopter stuff when he's hanging from the helicopter, and then there's a great Jackie Chan movie called Super Cop,
Right.
which takes that helicopter stuff to the next level, and apparently they had Darkman on the set, and we're looking at that stuff.
so it goes back and forth.
Yeah, so
Goes back and forth.
that's right. So it wasn't a one-way borrowing. shall we say.
The one thing that we had that was different, though, on Hercules and Xena, which maybe because we didn't know any better when we were starting off, we were all pretty fresh with
Yeah.
television, is that we had a full-time second unit.
We had a
So-
full-time second unit, and that really, nobody has that pretty much in
Yeah,
television.
yeah.
And that really was the difference in allowing just the coverage,
Yeah.
the amount of shots to tell
But
the story.
it was hard to get a lot of TV directors to actually embrace it because they didn't want to give their power away. And yet, if you had an 8-day shoot of main unit and you had an 8-day shoot of second unit, then you had a 16-day shoot, which is incredible for television if
is.
you
Yeah.
employed it. And so it was always surprising to us how hard it was to get other directors to embrace it.
And it really, over time, there were certain people who worked best in that system. Yourself, T.J. Scott, eventually some of the Kiwi directors, Michael Hurst, and people who understood what material they needed to shoot and what they could leave behind and trust the second unit.
Well, so something I'm interested about, because I understood how I did it when I was doing action, because I would design the sequence and I would draw it up and I would say,
Right.
I'm going to direct this, you're going to direct this, and it has to fit in between these two shots. But how did the other directors that didn't draw their own storyboards design the sequences?
There were key directors over time that learned how to utilize that system, utilize what second unit had to offer. Paul Grinder and Gary Jones, but Paul was really the last 5 years. He got really good. He saw every single Hong Kong Asian movie out there. And a lot of times in prep, he would go to the directors and work with the stunt coordinator and say, well, here's what, if you just shoot this, this, and this, we'll build the rest of the sequence.
Yeah.
And I've sat in the editing room with a lot of directors over time going, oh my God, I can't believe, where'd that come from? You know? So there was a lot of very surprised directors, especially guys who had come from long TV histories and really not used to that. So when the stunt coordinator would say, you need this shot of her landing and doing this and exiting frame, they'd shoot that, and then they had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
I've just blocked off the flow of blood to your brain. You'll be dead in 20 seconds unless I release you. Now, why are you following me?
When they started working on the Xena episode, I remember, I think you wrote a beat sheet, and I read it and like, oh my God, this is like The Bride with White Hair and Swordsman 3, and you hadn't seen those at that time, so I just gave them to you, and it just all kind of fell into place after that.
There's a great scene in Swordsman 3, because after that you had shown me it, and we tried desperately to get Bridget Lynn, of course, to play Xena's mom and to be play a bad guy. Anyways, where the idea of the pinch or pressure points, where she's got her white hair as the evil woman and puts the pinch on this guy and then flips off her white hair and mask in standing on some rocks, and he's got his pressure points, and then that kind of went on, and then suddenly there was the exploding 5-point thing at the end of Kill Bill 2. So I don't feel like in taking that little bit, which was from Star Trek into pressure points and all that, and then into killing Bill himself in Kill Bill.
Right. Well, and the thing that was great about the pinch is I think one of the reasons you were drawn to it is that it gave us a way to never have to have Xena have a sword or a knife to somebody's throat.
In fact, that was exactly what it did. And then there was a episode, and I think it's like episode 4 or something, about the little baby. And the director had Xena put a sword to like the bartender's throat, and I threw a fit and said, well, that's why we have the pinch. What are you doing? And so that, I think it was like the only time that we really played that tell me this at the end of a sword. And yeah, it was a great thing. This is not a good look to have your hero holding a gun to somebody's head.
Well, I would look for Jet Li and Bridget Lynn movies, but then after that, it was just like anything I thought was cool, I would put in a clip tape and say, guys, if we can't do this, maybe if we could just get a little bit of this action sequence, it would enhance the show.
We would look at things that were cool, and I think something that made those shows, I think, special, from my point of view, was we were doing things that we liked. We did things that we thought would be fun, and I think it was kind of like this big sandbox that we had to play in, and just try out things that, it's kind of like, I had always wanted to do a forced perspective sequence since I was 13 years old, and I'd seen Darby O'Gill and the Little People, and so we had these opportunities, and we were like, hey, I really want to do this kind of a sequence, and let's put it in. So when we would watch these clips, it would, we were just kind of fans going, this is really neat.
Yeah, because it was like, a lot at that time, they were all things that we had never seen before either. You know, our jaws would just hit the floor every time we saw them get away with something like
Yeah.
that. Like,
Yeah.
oh my God. And, you know,
The
I mean, that-
audacity of that.
There were so many gags that I would go take the tape back to New Zealand, show the stunt coordinator, and go, how do we get them to jump up and kick people in the chest? But I'd show people that, and they'd go, oh, we can't do that. And then it got into redesigning harnesses, because that was the big holdback for them, is how do we get proper pick points and harnesses. And I know they even went off to Vegas to see Vegas shows to see how they were doing harness gags and those, because it's all about where do you suspend a person.
And then it became kind of a science of scheduling. Like
Right.
you knew you couldn't put your lead actor or actress in a harness, or if you did, that you were sacrificing a lot of other stuff that you could get for the amount of time it took to do that. So we learned the science of inferring takeoffs and landings, and then cutting to a stunt double where they had the time to put the double in the harness and shoot all of that stuff. So part of it was when we look at these tapes and see what they did, and we had to figure out how to adapt it to what our special needs were.
Yeah, you built the whole episode around that one fight sequence.
Ashes of Time was a big visual influence. All those spinning bird cages, I think, were in the depths as she went in. Built One Against an Army off of,
Oh, is that where that came from?
yeah, the
Yeah, where he
giant
fights
fight.
the horse thieves, yeah. And then it's like the leader of the gang, you know, comes and cuts him in the throat. And there was that one sequence after that fight sequence where they come and they're looking at all the bodies.
You know, showing dead bodies, although it sounds easy to say here, that was a huge battle
Yeah.
for us. Even though there wasn't a standards in practice, what some of the executives said, there's 3 things you can't do. You can't do this, you can't kill kids, you can't kill mothers, you can't, so...
Didn't we violate all of those in the opening of Callisto
Yes,
alone?
and
Yeah.
T.J. Scott was the recipient of that information. T.J., we can't do that. And he went, okay, watch. So
also
there's a
had
kid
the-
lying there, and you go, well, is his eyes open? Is he
Yeah.
is he dead, or is he pretending to be dead? And I had that discussion with our executive at the time. I said, no, he's alive. He's just hiding.
Yeah.
The Shock'em actually, I had written a really pretty bad movie called, when it came out it was called Steel Dawn, but
Oh, yeah.
when I wrote it, it was called Nomad, and the character in that I had originally given that weapon to. I was trying to come up with some signature weapon, and I did a storyboarded sequence for the opening of that with this character that was eventually played by Patrick Swayze, having this thing, and he actually wore it as like a sun visor because it was all out in the desert, and he could take it up and throw it. And the idea in the beginning was that you had to handle it by the inside of the ring. We kind of lost that really quickly with Xena, but that he would throw this and then always catch it in the inside. If anybody else tried to catch it, they would cut their hands off. So when we were beginning on that season of Hercules, I was working as kind of an action design consultant, and I was storyboarding a lot of sequences for directors who generally would just throw it out and not use it because they had, I don't know
Right.
why, but we created a lot of cool sequences that didn't get shot.
That was Bruce Seth Green,
Yes.
who went on to Buffy after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, when we'd gotten together to talk about the character, and I remember being over at your house and just trying to come up with something, and I said it would really be good if we gave her a signature weapon, something only she has.
And then it was there's a book that 500 weapons or something that we used to have.
And that's where the name Chakram came from. Yeah,
Came from.
and it sort of became a thinner thing
It
than
was
I had
either going to be
originally.
that or Death Frisbee, and Chakram sounded a little more classic.
That's right.
somehow.
I don't know, Death Frisbee
Death
has certain
Frisbee,
marketing
Yeah,
possibilities.
exactly.
But it
Whammo
really is a
selling those.
Persian. It was a Persian weapon.
Right.
Yeah.
It's in the 500 weapons to kill your neighbor with.
Yeah.
You work at a great place when there's a book of 500 weapons.
She's got the baby!
Here, get rid of it! No, no, no!
That was, I think, from Heroic Trio.
The baby toss?
The baby toss in
baby toss was
Cradle
from-
of
Yeah,
Hope.
because that's
Cradle
the
of
one where
Hope,
they
right.
steal the babies out of the hospital, and then the two women fight, and then the baby falls, and they catch it, but not in time because
Right,
the baby
it
then gets
lands on
impaled on the nails.
Yeah, that's the difference between Xena and Hong Kong movies.
you've
Hong Kong
never
movies,
had
the
a baby
baby's on a
land on a
nail. We actually have
but-
seen it catch the baby.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the baby toss itself repeated itself numerous times in various incarnations over blades, over this or that. But,
Right.
But the actual tossing around, I think, was just the Cradle of Hope. Glowing Fire
Oh.
was from
Drunken Master 2, I believe.
Drunken Master 2 and
They did it in Ashes of Time also.
Ashes of Time. Blowing Fire was cool. Eric Grundeman
Yeah.
and he had a real problem with them.
Something about it being dangerous.
Yeah.
Something about, yes, you having your female lead of the series, a
Yeah,
bread and
have
butter for the
flammable
whole
material
series,
near her
yes.
face. I
don't
don't
know why
know.
he objected to that, but
You know, but
And
I could
you
always
made
tell
him do it.
Yes, and I could always tell the difference between Lucy really doing it or a Viz effect.
Right.
It just never felt the same. But because usually we did it and Lucy would blow it and then we'd do some sort of enhancement. But you could always tell if we did it real because you'd get that little dribble of kerosene down the chin and a bit of a burn going.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
uh,
Well, and you could just get those shots in, where it was profile, and it's so clear that it's Lucy doing it. I mean, and it just, I've never seen anything like that, I don't, in movies.
we should talk about the fact that Lucy was just so great to film with, just in general.
Yeah,
I mean, it was
fearless.
She would try anything, and she was such a trooper. It was always a pleasure to direct her, and she would do as much of everything as possible, even when she was pregnant.
That's right.
She
And
was
then
still a trooper.
And although it wasn't early on, because we kept Renee out of fights, she also was an
Renee,
incredible
yeah.
trooper, and eventually she became the master of these sides.
Really?
She was really good.
She
yeah.
was great with them, and
Yeah.
so for the last half of season 5 and all of season 6,
Yeah.
she became master o' size and flipping
Yeah.
swords. And Renee, unlike Lucy, Renee would go and practice sai stuff
Yeah.
for 2 hours a day.
Yeah.
She'd go
Really?
to.
I remember doing the chakram episode where we redesigned the chakram into the yin and yang chakram. There was a fight scene that Renee was going to do in the climax, and she had practiced it, and I wasn't going to film it because it was just a secondary thing. And I said, Renee, I don't have time to shoot that, and it's just I've got to concentrate on the main action. She said, well, that's okay, I understand, that's fine, but do you want to see what I've done? So I said, yeah, sure. So she showed me. She got up with the stunt guys, and she did this thing, and she had it down so well. I said, I got to film this. So we did, and because all I had to do was just turn the cameras on, or put 2 cameras on, and we shot it and had it to cut away to. But she was, Renee was so disciplined and just
So disciplined. She went and learned how to use that staff so well. Every day you'd go at lunch, and as I would be going to lunch, she'd be off on the side rehearsing her staff moves with the stunties and that. And she was dedicated to getting it as good physically as she could. And Lucy was all about selling it.
Right.
I'll do anything I can sell it. I mean,
Yeah, but the 2 of them together was really, for a director, they were a dream team to work with.
點玩？萬丈歸元，土聯經緯。五行幻化布迷蹤。
flowing cloth.
But there was a lot of flowing cloth in
Yeah.
Ghost Story, Chinese Ghost Story.
Yeah, there was that one with And the movie where she's flying, where she rides the flying, the giant peacock. What was that called? I don't remember. That was the main sequence where they were using flying fabric like that.
What was wasn't there a movie where there was all these banners suspended from a ceiling and the guys were sort of jumping and holding onto them and tearing as they went along?
They were, and we used that
In
sequence for
Young Hercules.
in
I
Young
think.
Hercules and in the Furies. We tried to, and it didn't.
It didn't work.
It didn't work.
That
Yeah.
might have been
So
like Once Upon a Time in China, Part 5, maybe.
Yeah. There
But-
was also the great, what was the great gag with the wet cloth into the staff?
Yeah, that was from Once Upon a Time in China, Part 2.
Yeah, that was really cool.
yeah. Never moves like you see it in a picture, certainly. Meaning, if you came with a Renaissance painting or picture and said, we want to do this, I went, but it doesn't work like that.
Right.
And the wardrobe designers and prop makers in Hong Kong, they must have spent a great deal of time getting just the right thread counts and weights, because that became difficult to always to try and get that to work like it's supposed to.
記住啊，你唔可以武功㗎。
愛情啊，你嘅魔力真係難頂啊！
收聲啊！
Evil Siamese
What is that
twins.
from?
That's Bride with White Hair.
Bride with
again.
White Hair.
The two main
Oh,
villains.
right, yes, yes,
When
right.
did we use Evil
It was
Siamese twins?
in season 5.
Trapped here in the world between worlds, kept alive by my burning hatred for you. Well, at least I have family to keep me company.
And so it seems I was fated to walk the path of the Green Dragon, Xena.
The 2-part Chinese ones that kind of were the beginning of season 5 going, oh, that doesn't quite work. So, yeah, it was Pregnant Xena, and anyways, I don't remember the name of it. I blocked it out because it was a bad experience. That was where, for a bunch of reasons, like all the writers leaving.
Not mentioning any names.
And not
here,
mentioning
no.
any names, but everybody was on vacation and the show was still shooting. The gauntlet scene in the gauntlet was incredibly successful.
Too successful.
Too successful. It was. Recently I've seen it and I went, oh, it wasn't as hard as I remember. It was taken from Bride with White Hair, and the one thing that we wanted to do that they couldn't do in New Zealand, and they went back and tried it, and it just looked hokey, was she's supposed to be walking on hot coals across this, and that's what they did in Bride with White Hair, and never got it to be believable.
Did Jack Perez direct that episode?
Yes, he
Jack
did.
Perez did direct. He was exactly the right director for that.
Our ad for Nicole Simpson.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. That was the timing was just right, and everyone going, "Oh my God, you can't put that on TV! You can't put that on TV!" And yes, Bride with White Hair actually
It's a lot of stuff.
a lot of stuff.
我要走啦嘛！
It is something too, though, that like when we talk about Crouching Tiger, is that a lot of people don't realize how the wealth of Hong Kong films that came prior to that, and
Right.
these are films that everybody should see. That's a film aficionado.
Right.
Should see Chinese Ghost Story. They should see Bride with White Hair, and I think they should see The Legend of Feng Sayat.
Yes,
Me too.
absolutely.
Part 1 and Part 2.
Yeah.
Chinese Ghost Story was made in 1987. I just I was going through my collection of stuff prior to coming over and went, oh my God, 87.
And I'm actually not a huge Crouching Tiger fan because to me it was
We've seen it.
We've been watching it for 12 years before that, so.
And it needed a better sound mix, in my opinion, because I learned from Rob too much about how you sell this stuff with, you got to hear every blow in the fight sequence. That's what makes it really cool. I mean, I sort of liked Hero better.
I liked Hero.
I liked Hero a lot.
Me too.
Come on, Xena, you're almost there.
It's yours.
The latter fight, go
I
ahead.
think that was great. I love that sequence.
That was T.J. Scott. who
T.J.
directed
Scott
that,
did that. And it was
T.J. Scott,
fantastic.
and what was really interesting about T.J. is he called the whole, after the first day, which was a disaster shooting, because they were used to working in their little proper function, he called the crew together and said, look guys, this isn't going to work. I'm never going to get this fight done. There's too much. I need to get like 40 setups a day. We need to start rocking and rolling, and I'm prepared, and you guys, and I need you to do this, and you to do this. And he really called the crew out in order to get them working at a higher level. And that was one of the few times guys had been able to do that. And what's interesting is, never got that back on Herc and Xena. They were kind of set in their ways. Now they're shooting Mighty Morphin Power Rangers with virtually the same crew, or much of the same crew, who is shooting Xena at the end. And the second unit on that, which is Japanese run, they're shooting 100 setups a day.
Wow.
Just running and gunning, no masters, no coverage, and they go, okay, this now, and okay, go, and they're off. And
Well, when we did start shooting Xena, though, I know we were getting much more coverage than Hercules was at the time.
Yes.
'cause
we were
going faster than we had ever gone before.
Yeah, well, that and the
was
16
kind of necessary.
millimeter package helped with that.
yeah, 16 was faster.
I mean, in some ways, I love, those early episodes of Xena are my favorite, and I really think a lot of it is because of the 16.
Underwater kiss sequence from the Det was right out of
Almost shot for shot.
shot for shot from Chinese Ghost Story.
And we tried to do it before. We tried to do it in like episode number 5, The Reckon, with Bobby Hosea in it.
Pass not taken. I
Yeah,
think it was.
we had it written in there, and then it didn't live.
It didn't live. It lived at the right place.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about Xena and Gabrielle's relationship was when we sold the show to Tribune, they said the one thing we do not want this to be is a romance about two women.
Yeah.
And so therefore, the first 5 or 7 episodes, there was all Xena's old lovers.
Yeah.
Perdiccas coming, Gabrielle's going to get married.
Yeah.
Just endless amounts to satisfy the syndicate, our partners in
Right.
some regard, their request that this be a show about 2 women on the road and not about 2 women in a romantic relationship. And we never felt that we wrote to that until fans really started to pick up on it and see things that we had never really intended.
Right.
And then with time, we
started playing with it a bit.
playing with it.
Wonderful. I've never been so happy. So. What? So happy. Well, what are you doing?
I remember the one episode we did, Altered States.
Right. Yeah, with the fishing sequence in the opening.
The fishing in the opening, and kind of shocked that we got away with all of that. And
Because the studio had wanted Gabrielle to be a guy, right? I mean,
Well, they had thought about that, and then we had promised them a guy character who we never
we just
eventuated.
lied.
Pan, some guy who leaps through the trees and is a deaf mute. Exactly what you want in TV to further your story, carry all the exposition. So, oh, don't have her say that. Give it to the deaf mute. But that character, although we kind of skirted in stories that when we were breaking stories, putting those kind of things in, really the Xena and Gabrielle relationship was something that just kind of evolved on its own.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it really just started from that we didn't, and it helped being a period piece, but that they weren't, you know, when they had conversations, they weren't talking about their boyfriends, or they weren't talking about hairstyling products. I mean, they were, you know, it's like it was just about the two of them and their relationship, and then people started reading that as it being a romance between the two of them. Which, I mean, I was completely shocked. You remember when we had the shot in the main titles where Draco is moving towards her, but it's shot from behind Jay's back so that he has a ponytail. Yeah. And Naomi at the studio said, you have to cut that shot out. They're going to think that she's a lesbian and that she's about to kiss a woman. And I thought, and you know, and being gay, and I go to the supermarket with my girlfriend who is Creole, so she's African American, and I'm white, and people look at us and say, "Are you two sisters?" I said they're never going to think that Xena and Gabrielle are lesbians, and then this thing happened, and everybody did.
Go figure.
I know nothing.
你嘅身材都唔錯噃。
你都有兩分知識啊！
The clothes stealing? Geez, David, do you remember? It worked really well in the Xena. I just don't remember how well it worked in.
I think it worked fine in both of them, really.
I remember at the time T.J. Scott, who shot that episode, and it was his girlfriend who was stealing the clothes, now his wife, that he vastly underestimated the difficulty and time it was going to take to do that, because he had like standard reverses of pulling this, and it was all in reverse motion. It was very tricky and complicated, and little wires pulling things and making it all look right. And suddenly he spent like a half a day on what he thought was going to be an hour.
I think Xena's was sexier just because our women are more curvaceous.
Right. Right out of
Swordsman 3.
Swordsman 3. Never, that was not done as well as in the original movie, as in Swordsman 3, because there's a shot in there, because I've recently seen it, where she's got the dice in her fingers and she tosses them up, pulls up her sleeve in one wild move, catches the dice, tosses them, and it was just much more exaggerated and precise. So even though that episode had stuff that I think we did better than Hong Kong movies, I think we actually got fabric and people flying and some of those weird things working better. That particular sequence was not realized as well as the original, which is always not a great thing to do, but it was still a good idea.
It was really interesting, and again, that for a lot of us, it was our first experience in television. Well, Hercules and Xena. I don't think we appreciated how good we had it then, because it was the only, it was like our first shows, and they were both successful. We thought, well, sure, it's always going to be like this. And
And we were so, relatively speaking, left alone.
we were really
to
left
do
alone.
what we
and
wanted,
allowed
what
to.
we thought was cool,
and,
you know?
And
Those
and I-
days are gone.
Yeah.
It's over, yeah.
I think that a lot of us, for our experiences that we've had since then, have proven that how unique that was, and how none of us ever have an experience like that again, where we have that much freedom and have that much fun shooting something, and be able to just sit there and say, what can we do next week? What other cool thing that we
Right.
haven't done yet that we want to play with?
Yeah, and it's so different. It's funny because recently I was looking back at some of the old episodes, and just the show looked so great, you know, and nobody else is doing, even back then, wasn't doing anything like that. Nobody's doing sort of period fantasy on TV right now. That nothing that you look at and go and are visually excited by. I think it's part of the reason why I'm always a little less interested in sci-fi stuff, is that there's a certain cold gray palette. And you know, I mean, we went to China and India and, you know, every place imaginable, and it was just cool. Nobody does stuff like that.
No, those days are gone.
Those days are gone. I had no idea how good I had it.
No, me neither.
Yeah.
I knew at the time that it wasn't going to be having more history behind me and being older.
Yeah.
That it wasn't going to be a situation that was going to be duplicated, and enjoyed it along.
And there were a lot of people I remember down in New Zealand, people that kind of grew up on the series, because we were down there for how many years? Like 8 years. So there were a lot of people that began their filmmaking careers working on those shows and were steadily employed for 8 years, who didn't realize that one day it was going to end. And then we thought, who's going to ever shoot anything down in New Zealand after
Right.
that? And then, well,
Well, yeah,
now we know.
we're smart enough to
Yeah.
go, hey, that worked pretty well for them.
Right.